Hello, everyone who's already joined us. We may have some more people trickling in over the next few minutes, but let's go ahead and get started here. Today's topic is parenting with chronic pain, and we have two fabulous panelists here to speak with you both today. I'll let them introduce themselves here, but it's Dr. Abigail Hirsch and Charlie Merrill.
Hi, I'm Dr. Abigail Hirsch. I'm a co-founder here at lin.health, but a clinical psychologist by training. And actually, much of my work before founding Lin and getting really deep into the world of chronic pain was in terms of parenting skills. So I'm really excited to pull both of these sides of my world together. I will also add, because it's very relevant here, I'm mom to 4 boys that range in age from 10 to 22.
I'm Charlie Merrill. I'm a physical therapist in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm a clinical consultant with lin.health. And so, as part of my career, my career is about talking with people across the whole age span about pain and other chronic symptoms. So, I've of course had my own pain experiences, like all of us have, because as I say, pain is a normal human experience. And I've seen how it's connected to relationships and parenting and my kids, and maybe some of that will come up today. I have 3 kids. They're all teenagers. They're all in high school. They're 15, 16, and 17. So I'm sort of in the thick of that phase of my life as a parent. And I sometimes joke that I almost don't remember when they were really young, but I don't think that's true. I think that I just have to maybe work a little harder to think back to what it was like when they were babies in that first few years of life, which of course has its own set of challenges as a parent. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation today and seeing where it goes.
Well, so we're going to structure this conversation a little bit different than some of our other webinars. When I was thinking about how to approach this topic, what I thought might be helpful was for us to first kind of highlight some themes that we hear often from our members who are coping, learning their way out of chronic pain, we hope, and also parenting. So I wanted to kind of raise 5 themes, and then we're going to kind of pivot a little bit. I want to give 3 quick tips, very practical things from my world, actually as a parenting psychologist and raising my own kids, but the 3 that have been really carefully called because I think they're different than what a lot of people hear out there, and they're incredibly valuable, I believe, in terms of how do I manage being a great parent and also all of the drain that comes with chronic pain. So what I've actually done is I had it before our webinar, an extended conversation with a number of members, but I've called from one member who, and Anne, I'm incredibly grateful to you for letting us share this with folks. Some just little clips on each of these themes. So I thought what I would do is kind of introduce the theme. We'll listen for like 30 seconds to something Anne had to say on the theme, and then Charlie and I will talk about it a bit, and we'll kind of move that forward from there. So you ready to go, Charlie?
Let's go. Let's do it.
All right. So first theme here. Our first theme is be honest. Your kids are going to know that you're different from other parents. So let's hear a little bit what Anne has to say.
Children would learn that standing and walking were the 2 things that were difficult for me. So they would know little things like if we're waiting in line, I wait in line, and then I call the mom, and she comes when the time is, when we're near to the front. The other thing, one would be in church services, and I would stand to sing. They would sometimes pull my coat down and, be like, just get, it's still respectful, you can sit and sing, In lots of ways, they knew that I just couldn't do as much as other mothers could do. Children would learn that standing and walking were the 2 things that were difficult.
Let me stop my auto loop from going here. Wasn't expecting that. The technology, huh? So being different and being honest with your kids about the fact that you're different. I think this can be a real dilemma for folks coping and managing and learning their way out of pain, because in so much of our lives, we let this be an invisible disorder. And so, in our adult lives, we often are being very careful to not show And it's a very fine line when it comes to kids about acknowledging what they're seeing, and letting them understand their parent is their own special, unique person. And this is just kind of the unique kind of person I am. I have these demands or these things that I am managing, and having enough honesty while also not putting the burden of pain onto your kids. Yeah, Charlie, curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I
think about the theme in the clip.
One thing I've learned as a parent is that your kids know, almost regardless of whether you think they know or not. I joke that my oldest kid is like a shaman, and so she almost has this sensitivity. But all of my kids, I realize, have this sort of knowing, and appreciating that is important. And I think it really requires that we're really vulnerable and open and honest with our kids, to sharing, checking with ourselves to see what comes up, how it makes us feel, and then sharing like a child-sized version of that with our kids, and then really reaching out to them to see how they feel about it. I think it's a beautiful way to open up a conversation and to learn more about kids' experiences, and it can be very connecting.
I completely agree. And I would just, to normalize this a little bit, there's all kinds of things that our kids kind of know about us that in age-appropriate ways we address more and more. And I'll give one example. It would be finances, right? Every family has different financial situations. And when kids are little, we share less directly about that, but they have a sense. And we have some conversations around, this is the kind of things we buy or we don't buy, or this is, what your allowance is going to be or not going to be. And so same with pain. In an age-appropriate way, we can start to introduce, like Anne was saying, hey, it just works better for our family if I can sit while I'm in line, and I really appreciate that you're such a big girl and can do that to help me. And then as kids get older, we add in more information and more transparency and more discussion. So as kids start to be in late elementary or middle school, it starts to be appropriate to explain why mom can't sit sometimes, or what's going on, or what is my understanding of my pain, or what am I doing to try and change the situation. But very important to acknowledge that your kids understand what's going on or see that you're different, and find age-appropriate and kid-appropriate ways to open that discussion, and to open that discussion multiple times over the years, because kids need a different discussion as they age.
Yeah, one of the things that came up for me as you were sharing that example, like if I put myself in that situation, where I'm having to stand in church, I might go to my kid later and say, hey, you might notice that I have to, or I'm sure you noticed that I have to stand up, and I really miss being able to sit with you. It's really hard for me to not be able to sit with you, and I just wanted to let you know that. But I'm working hard to see if I can figure out a way to make that happen. They may not fully understand that, but then it's an opportunity to check in with them and say, how does that make you feel that I'm not able to be with you in the church pew, or however you want to say it. But it's just normalizing and validating that it's hard for the parent, that the parent is having feelings about it, and then really checking in with the kid about how they're feeling.
Absolutely. All right, let's look at our next theme here.
Abigail?
So here we go. Yes.
Real quick, wondering if there's any way to hold the mic just a little bit closer to the phone for the next one, just so the audio comes through a little clearer.
I am going to do my darndest.
Thank you.
And thank you for everybody listening as we're sorting out the technical on a slightly new format. Okay, so this one is around finding moments that you can connect, and really nice segue, Charlie, from what you were saying. Let's listen to Anne here, hopefully.
I would watch Arthur with one of my daughters every morning before school, because that's the kind of thing I could do. It is very comforting to sit, and we lived in Illinois, so it's cold in the winter, and, sit with blankets and cuddle with your child. Who doesn't want to do that? It is glass half full,
Great. So let's fill in a little bit more. I saw Charlie smiling. I'm curious what piece of that clip got you smiling, Charlie.
I just appreciate there's an acknowledgement that we're wired for connection, and that connection is so healing, both for adults and for kids. but also, knowing as a parent that it's really hard to carve time for that. And the little things in life, the daily activities that we all have to do, like cooking and cleaning and, all of those tasks take up a lot of time and energy, especially when we're dealing with pain and other symptoms. Doesn't feel like there's a lot of bandwidth for those other, they're like discretionary activities, like, the fun activities. And so, remembering that we're wired for connection and that in and of itself is healing, hopefully allows people to give themselves permission to carve more space to do that with their families.
I completely agree. And the importance of thinking through, how am I going to find those moments? The other piece that I really love in Anne's recollections and advice here was the idea that I can find a different way to connect than other moms might find. So where other parents might be saying, oh, no screen time in the mornings, Anne turned that into something that was really, really a special time for her and her daughter, of cuddling up and watching the cartoon and laughing at it together, because that was something that was really doable for her in terms of her pain levels, and also was able to take that and turn it into something that was really a special time. So really looking for, where are the ways that for me works to connect with my children, and carve out those special warm spaces, even though they may look very, very different than other people's ways and times and spaces that they connect. But really, I think it's, again, Charlie, back to your point, making sure that it is top of mind, that I find some vehicle that works for me to connect in a way that works for me and for my child, as opposed to in a way that out there says might be right. All right, next theme here. Let's get our theme back up. So our next theme is around setting boundaries. It's kind of the opposite side of connecting in some ways, that just like that intimate time is really important. It's also incredibly important, and especially, in parenting in general, but especially when one is parenting in the context of pain, to be able to set some limits, set some boundaries, carve out space for yourself. So let's hear what Anne has to say again.
The meditation, the quiet time, was very important to me, as anyone with children can imagine. After lunch, that little nap time, that was my hour, And the children learned that I would teasingly say to them, don't come in unless there's fire or blood, And they knew that it's mom's quiet time.
So there's two pieces for me that stand out from Anne's advice here about the first is carving the time and feeling comfortable telling her kids, I need to carve this time, or I need the rule to be X, Y, or Z. This is how it goes in our house, and setting those boundaries. But I love the way she did it with a lightness and a tease and a kind of a playful mantra of her version of don't come in unless there's blood or fire. My goodness, I hope there was never fire. I don't think there was. But I think that can be a way to really help those boundaries still have a lightness to them, and also a stickiness to them when one finds a way to introduce them with a bit of humor and playfulness, but also with a firmness. Curious for you, Charlie, what stands out?
Yeah, I think that act of setting boundaries with kids also sort of models for them that kids sometimes forget that we're people, right? Like they're so focused on themselves, having 3 teenagers, I'm seeing that right now. And so setting boundaries actually is a way to model for kids that we're worth taking care of. Like I as a parent, I take care of my own needs, and what a great gift to be able to show kids. And the other thing I thought about is, we have this sort of list of personality traits that those of us, and I include myself in that category, have, and a lot of parents have, like being highly conscientious, being high achieving, caretaking of others, often at the expense of ourselves, is probably the most important one. And so while we need to set boundaries sometimes with our kids, we also need to oftentimes set boundaries for ourselves, or even with ourselves, So we're not beating ourselves up. We're not expecting that we, do everything for our kids. Like, we don't need to expect that of ourselves. So there's like a boundary setting with ourselves that's also important as part of this process, in addition to with our kids.
Maybe that's also, I think, something we often don't think about with boundaries, that boundaries have two sides to them always, right? And so inherently, when you're setting a boundary with your kids, you're also giving yourself some room on the other side of the fence. And I really like what you're saying, Charlie, about knowing that giving yourself that room on your side of the boundary, first, is a great thing for your kids. It's really important to learn that there are these divisions, and that it is, in some ways, a kind and generous thing to do, because it is what's going to let you give yourself what you need, so that you also can have other times where you are that giver and that connector.
I forget this all the time, right? The airplane metaphor, like put your oxygen mask on before you put your kid's oxygen mask on. And I find myself being like, why am I doing it backwards again? I need to put mine on first.
Absolutely. Well, and I think, Charlie, that with all of these, the reason I wanted to highlight these themes is each of them is something that I do think we just need to come back to over and over and over again. How are we connecting? How are we having the discussion? How are we setting boundaries? And with that, here's another one that's, part of what I like about these is they all pull, we pull one way and then we also pull the other way. So on the one hand, we need to cultivate some boundaries. At the same time, another side of it in terms of tips and themes for us to be thinking about is cultivating friends and letting yourself accept help. So let's hear from Anne, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that too.
Well, I found this place, God bless this woman. She had a little program called Family Network in Highland Park, Illinois. And it was open from, I think it was 9 to 12 every day. And they had teachers in these playrooms. And you could leave the children, and then the mothers would hang out in another room. And we all did different kinds of crafts in there, while the kids were playing. It was fantastic. You need as many people and as many adults who can be resources for you as possible. It reminds me of what my aunt used to say: make your friends before you need them.
I have to say, I love Anne's perspective on making your friends before you need them. And I love her inherent explanation of how you do that, which is by finding institutions in your community that are little gems that bring people together. And so for Anne, it was finding this play group set up where she could really be with the moms and do crafts and tidbits, but also where she knew ahead of time that if she was having a day that she just needed somewhere to drop her kids or somebody else to pick up a gallon of milk or whatever might be the piece that she needed a little bit of an extra hand, that she did have friends around her that knew enough of the situation and that she let herself feel comfortable sometimes taking some help from. I want to add one more thing before I pass it over to you, Charlie, that she said after this clip, which I just can't say strong enough. If you're lucky enough to or do have a spouse in the equation, really important to remember that your spouse is also one of these friends, and to think about how can you allow your spouse to be helpful, because there's so much that a spouse can't help with in pain in terms of the experience inside your body. But it in many ways is the generous thing in any relationship to let the other person do what they can, which is sometimes helping you. Yeah, Charlie, curious what's going through your mind.
I think it just comes back to the fact that we're wired for connection, and friendships are such a protective factor when it comes to really anything, like any challenge in life, pain being one of the big ones. That it's so protective to have a community of people around you to make you not feel alone. And I also, though, want to normalize that the world gets really small when people are in pain, and it becomes really difficult to maintain relationships and to find the time and the energy to even get in the car and drive somewhere to meet people. And people will notice that there are a lot of friends that go away when they're in chronic pain. And there are very few that are the loyal friends that stick around when things get really hard. So I just think, acknowledging that can be a really common challenge for people. But it's another act of self-care that takes some energy and takes some commitment to really making the time and the space to go out and foster those friendships, knowing that it's going to pay off. That energy is going to pay off.
Yeah. And pays off, I think, in two ways. It pays off, not only in terms of someone there to help, but that there is also something uplifting about staying connected with the world. And pain has a way of making us want to pull into ourselves. It's what it's designed to do, is to make us, flee and withdraw from the world and, not do things that we perceive as dangerous. And all too often that gets extended into having these social connections inside and outside of our home. And so to really be deliberate about saying, I need to kind of oversample on this and find, again, what are ways that for me are groups, whether it be a church or a play group or a reading group or a book club or an exercise group, but somewhere where I build up really deliberately on this network of connections, because I know that the pain is going to be trying to pull me in the other direction, and that it is really, really helpful for us human beings to have that social connection there.
Can I add one more thing to that, Abigail? I just
for sure.
I want to appreciate that. People are often looking to us as clinicians to help problem solve some of these things, like how am I going to go out and do this? And there are all these barriers. And it just reminded me that, like, at the end of the day, my clients, our members within Lin, really have the tools and the ideas to solve a lot of these problems. I mean, it's recognizing and normalizing that there are a lot of barriers. But then it's really working with people and trusting that they have all the ideas, because this looks different for everybody. Like how do you nurture your friendships is different for every single person that we talk to. So I just like to bring people back to, like, yes, this feels hard. Yes, there are a lot of barriers. And if we work together, you have the tools to figure this out and to come out of this sort of this world that feels very small. It's the self-healing idea, right? And I just like to remind people that they have all the answers. They have all the tools. I'm just here to be the guide on the journey.
Charlie, I love that. And look, it's really, just for 2 seconds to talk about how we work at Lin, it really is what our coaches really are there to do, is to help you find the voices, the solutions, the directions forward that may not be immediately obvious at the beginning, but it's incredible how sometimes having a partner in thinking things through can let you take the steps that and find the directions that are right for you. And incredibly, I think, satisfying for everybody when we can be a little bit of a spark that helps makes that happen.
I hope that people consider us, our clients and our members, friends at some level, right? That's how we try to show up for people.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm honestly a place for a lot of our members where they're starting that, rebuilding that social connection, which gets back to the kind of friend we like to be here at Lin, and another theme for parenting, which is really emphasizing the positive and picking the important things. So let me now just find where Anne went here, and we'll hear from her again for a second.
Right. The mindset is to emphasize the positive and what I could do versus what I couldn't do. And then another important piece is you can't compare yourself with other mothers your age. And you have to guard, because you'll get kind of jealous when you hear about things they've done and things they're able to do. But it makes you always pick the most important things to do.
I'd love to reverse, Charlie. Give me your thoughts first.
I was thinking, like, what's the saying that comparison is the killer of joy, right? Like, just in general, regardless of whether you have pain or not, anytime you're comparing yourself to someone else, it really does takes the spark out of life. And I also, there's the saying that I heard one time that I often share with people, and that's that, if everyone took their problems and put them in a bucket and you saw everybody else's problems, you'd probably take yours back really quickly. And so never underestimate what other people are dealing with in their own lives. People show up in this way that seems incredible and like they have no problems. But I can tell you from my perspective as a clinician, especially in the last 2 years, everybody has a story. This is an unprecedented time in history, and every person I meet has their own level of challenge and stress and difficulty. And so I like to remind people that, they're not alone in this. And it's tempting to want to compare ourselves to social media and Instagram, and all these things look so great on the surface, but everybody has their own challenges right now. That's what came up for me. You're preempting the next theme here. We're going to double down on that, the perspective picking. I think for me, another piece that really stands out is this emphasis on, I have the power to choose. Do I look at the glass half full or half empty? Because there's so many things that we don't have control over in our lives, and again, around pain also. But it's really a core pillar of pain recovery, is that we need to make this flip from, the vast majority of our time and our effort and our thoughts being about the challenges that we're facing or the things we can't do, in Anne's words, to flipping to all the things we can do and enjoying them and savoring them and looking for the positive. So I also really like this because I think it's really important in terms of parenting, our choice of what we look at in our kids. And one of the things that pain has a tendency to do is, leave us a little bit irritable and grumpy sometimes. And when that's the glasses that we've been wearing, it's very easy to start to look at one's children as challenges also. They don't get up enough, they don't help enough, they don't listen enough, et cetera. And I really, really like having the perspective that says, wait, especially because I'm a parent who also has this additional demand on my, internal resource, that I'm going to choose when I'm thinking about my kids to think about the things I love about them and I find endearing about them. I'm going to look at the kid who's bossy as a budding leader. I'm going to look at the kid who doesn't put things down and come when I call them as someone who's able to be engrossed in their work and passionate about the thing that they're doing. I'm going to look at the kid who is jumping on the couch and think of them as somebody who's energetic and elite and maybe an athlete. But I think that perspective, again, pausing and asking ourselves, where can I find that positive perspective about myself and my efforts, and it being okay that my efforts are great, they're what I can do, and I'm letting myself be kind to how I look at myself, but also being kind to how I look at my kids. I keep thinking of all these sayings, and I love this saying, see your kid differently and you'll start to see a different kid. And if you see your kid as being challenging all the time and they're misbehaving, trying to flip that, it's hard to do, but it's amazing the way the behavior in a kid shifts when you start to break that habit of seeing them in a certain way. Can I share this one thing? I shared this with one of my clients the other day who's 14, and she was talking about how she feels guilty a lot. And she has symptoms, and most people don't know that 1 in 4 kids, same stat as adults, has chronic symptoms. And this young woman has her own symptoms. But I just shared this. It was an Instagram post with her, and it says, if you tend to identify with failures, remind yourself of your resilience. If you tend to identify with shortcomings, remind yourself of your uniqueness. If you tend to identify with your fears, remind yourself of your strength. And everybody dealing with pain has a lot of strength, whether they know it or not. If you tend to identify with mistakes, remind yourself of your growth, how hard you're trying. And if you tend to identify with insecurities, remind yourself of your worth. And sometimes we have to kind of fake it to make it at first, right? We have to sort of do this even though it feels awkward and foreign. But man, does it make a difference day to day.
Absolutely. So choosing to look for the positive in yourself, in your efforts as a parent, and in your children. So important, and such a thing that we do have control over, no matter what's happening in terms of our pain or our sensations. Mm-hmm. All right, so we are at the last of the themes before we get to Abigail's special parenting tricks. They're not just mine, I confess, but I do think they're incredibly powerful. So the last theme is, again, further going on this theme of perspective being so important. And I'll just share how Anne thinks about it.
And then another thing that would inspire me is people that had gone through something like that. There are many people, like there's this Johnny Erickson Tata, who's she's completely paralyzed with chronic pain. And she's a writer and an artist. And, and I think, well, at least I can move, even though it's uncomfortable. And there are many people that have succeeded. And I think you're having a faith in God and in Jesus has helped me a lot. I'm not saying it's going to help everybody, but knowing that for some reason, for this short time, I'm dealing with this, but this isn't the end of the story.
For me, one of the things I love is all this theme about perspective picking and looking for reference points that help me feel good about what I have and what I can do. But I also like Anne's idea, and again, where people have their own perspective about whether it's religion or spirituality or nature or family, but to find something that gives you like this bigger perspective. That it's not just about the minute-to-minute of what I'm experiencing with pain, or the minute-to-minute about what I'm experiencing with these kids that are in front of me, but to have somewhere that lets you zoom out and see this from a bigger, grander, fuller space, I think can be incredibly, incredibly helpful to weather the moments and the ups and downs that every parent hits. And also to weather the journey of pain to recovery. Yeah, Charlie, any other thoughts on perspective?
Where I kind of went there is, we talk about the biopsychosocial model of symptoms or chronic symptoms, where we're considering the body, the psychology, and the social realities of any given person, and all of those things are going to determine, whether you have symptoms or depending on what's going on in your life in those realms. But there's also a spiritual realm. So the biopsychosocial spiritual model sort of allows even that next layer. And we can harness that with a lot of people and start to bring in some of that experience and that wisdom to the process, because there really is like a surrendering. Sometimes there's a surrendering to something bigger, to something that's awe-inspiring that we don't understand. That's a really important part of the process. And so I really appreciate the way Anne shared that, because there's a lot of value, there's a lot of power in even taking that perspective of, I don't understand, I don't know, but I'm going to trust it anyway.
And I think that this is one where in some ways, again, I don't want to say that chronic pain and parenting, like having chronic pain makes parenting easier, but I do think this is like one of those kind of blessings that we can choose to look at as blessing. Is for every parent, it's a struggle to zoom out and have the bigger perspective. But I think that because it's so much of what we need to do in the work of pain, we can get better at doing that for ourselves as parents also. And it is very, very established that parents who are able to step out from the moment, take a deep breath, see a bigger window, in the long run are the parents that are just great parents, and able to be there not in the just in the minutia, but in the big grand picture of raising these blessings that we call kids.
It reminds me of the book by Wendy. I think her last name is pronounced Mogel or Mogul, The Blessing of a Skinned Knee. I think it's a great book for any parent to read about, parenting in general and kids and the value of struggle and resilience. I just thought I'd bring that into the conversation because it's a wonderful book for parents.
Love that book. Would recommend it at the very top of any parenting read, and especially for people who are parenting and managing chronic pain. All right, so now we're going to find out if my specific tips live up to all the hype here. So let's kind of shift mode. I'll give some tips, and then Charlie will add his thoughts as well. So the first one I like to call family mantra. In recovery, pain recovery work, we work a lot with mantras about what is a mantra that can help us think about our pain differently. I have found that to be an incredibly, incredibly important tool for families as well, because of what you say in a mantra kind of way comes to be the reality. So I'll give you a favorite example from my story. So 4 boys. I'm sure most people can put one and one together and surmise that there was lots of opportunities for them to bicker over toys and fight over this and, come to near blows over that. So my family mantra was always, Hirsch boys don't fight. And whenever they would come to me telling me that they were fighting, I would just say, oh, Hirsch boys don't fight. Hirsch boys always get along. And then kind of go on my way as if they weren't fighting and as if they were getting along. Well, we were talking that most of my kids are quite a bit older at this point. We're talking about what they remember from their childhood at one point, and they said, oh, we all get along great, and we get along because that's what our family did. Hirsch boys don't fight. So it was really very clear to me that for years and years and years, even after you use the mantra, they have an ability to stick and create a new reality. Charlie, I'm watching your nods.
I'm just agreeing with you because I appreciate you sharing that. Do you want me to add a new one, or do you have a list and then I can?
Yeah.
Do you want to do it back and forth?
Let's go down these 3 and then we'll add some more tips. Okay. So tip number 1: find a family mantra. Find mantras that lead you towards the reality you want to have, and repeat them over and over and over for everybody. Doesn't take a lot of effort. It makes huge results. The next one is random reinforcement. So this is straight out of Psychology 101, what we know about how to get any animal, whether it is a rat or a human being, to do something we want, is that the best way to reinforce a behavior that we want more of is not to put a chart on the wall and tick it every single time, and not to say after 10 minutes you get this in a kind of a predictable reinforcement schedule, but is to have the reinforcement come at random times, at random intervals, when we catch people doing something good. So what I used to do is I always had a prize jar hidden in my closet, and when Mom felt like it was the right time to notice that my kids were picking up their toys or were doing their homework well, I would just all of a sudden be like, oh, look at this, everybody's doing their homework, it's prize time! And we'd go get the prize jar down and everyone would pick their prize. So what happens when you use random reinforcement, in other words, reinforcement when Mom feels like, I just have the time and the energy and the desire to reinforce, to bring in the prize, whether it's a prize jar or a trip for ice cream, it is incredibly sticky for making that behavior happen more. Way, way, way more sticky than any other reinforcement thing. But I particularly like this as a parenting tip for people coping with pain, because it also puts you in the driver's seat of the timing of this thing. So you can choose to reinforce at a time that's good for you to go get ice cream or pick out the prize jar or watch an extra TV show, just depending on your need. But knowing that that is going to go a very, very long way towards helping get more of the behavior that you want. All right, here's my third tip, and then Charlie gets to add.
I'm just taking notes. I'm taking notes for myself. As you know.
Good. So throw out all those charts on the walls and the things that are too hard to keep on top of. Reinforce when you feel like is the right time, knowing that doing it at random times is actually the more powerful technique. All right, and the last one here is focus on what you do well. It's so easy. Oops, sorry. It's so easy as a parent to, hang on, I just got stuck in 1 second here, you guys. Okay. It's so easy as a parent to say, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that, I'm supposed to do the other thing. And I think it's really, really helpful to say, wait, what is the thing that I do best? So for me as a parent, what I did best was structuring a play situation and letting my kids play on their own. For my husband, what he does best is being right in the middle of the action in the game. And for a long time, I would look at him and I'd be like, oh, I'm not as good a parent. You're right in there. You're rolling around with them. You're so active. And then at some point I realized, wait a minute, I'm a great parent. I just do what I do well in a different way. And so to let yourself look for what you do well and do lots and lots more of that as a parent, as opposed to looking for what other people do well, because there's plenty of other people in your kids' lives who do different things well. So what else should we add, Charlie?
Oh man, I have lots of ideas to share. What came up for me was how much I encourage people in pain to seek out novelty with their kids and to break out of rhythm and routine because of how effective that is. But at a foundational level, I think the rhythm and routine itself and the ritual of things, like your mantra that you were talking about, is so important for kids and for adults. And one of the rituals and routines that we have built into our dinner time, well, one of them is that we have family dinner almost every night where we sit at the table all together and there's no technology and there's no distraction. We go around the table and we usually do some version of what we call rosebud thorn, which is sharing a rose from our day, which is something that was great that happened. Sharing a thorn from our day, which was something challenging that happened and maybe how we navigated it. And then sharing a bud, which is something that we're looking forward to the next day or in the future. And it's something that our kids have gotten used to and they love. And it's just a part of our ritual and routine of our family now. And there's a great book that just came out by a Greek author called Ritual. And it's really the power of incorporating these things that sometimes don't seem like they have a lot of meaning into life, because at a primal level, they're really what gives life purpose and richness and value and meaning. And so I think I like to encourage that ritual and routine for all parents, especially when things seem like they're feeling more chaotic, like they often do when people are in pain and feel like they have less control.
Completely agree. So with that, just watching kind of our time, I know we want to be able to answer questions. I think Jordan's going to come in and queue us up with questions from people who are on the webinar.
Yeah, so we had a couple of questions submitted ahead of time. If anybody attending today has a question, please feel free to put it in the Q&A section. It's a button for it at the bottom of the screen there, and I can convey it to the hosts. You can also type it in the chat there. But I can give you, Abigail and Charlie, a question that we got ahead of time here, which was, do children start to mimic our health problems?
That is such an important question. So I'll start by saying this is one that historically the psychological literature kind of had a heyday with, there's all kinds of syndromes and not particularly helpful names that psychologists gave to kids imitating parents' problems or parents putting their problems onto their kids. And I think what we've learned as psychologists over the years is that is really the vast exception to the rule. So on the one hand, kids always do look up to their parents and learn from their parents. But I think carrying a burden that because I have some pain or some limitations, it means that my child is going to pick up on them and have them too, is probably not such a helpful perspective. I think more helpful is that my child is likely to pick up on how I respond to adversity in life, and how I teach them explicitly about how I respond to adversity. And so if I can show them, hey, these are the ways that I help empower myself. These are the ways that I'm taking myself on a learning journey. These are the ways that I can change my perspective on pain. That is much, much more likely to stick with your child than copying the symptoms themselves. Charlie, do you want to add anything to that?
I think that was well said. I think that was really well said. I think it just to say it's one of the really common fears that parents in these situations have is that they worry that they're not modeling for their kids what they would like to model. And I have one mom in particular I'm thinking of that realizes that she shows up in the world as in a more anxious way because of how she grew up. What she says is a mom that was more anxious, and she's now feeling really empowered having recognized that to really do what you're saying, which is to bring more intention to her parenting as best she can so that she doesn't pass that on to their kids. Now, I always say, like, we all pass things on to our kids. Like, we're not going to do it perfect. We're all imperfect, and all of our kids are going to grow up with some behaviors and patterns that are the result of who we were as parents. And then that's their journey and their growth to then learn and understand what that means for them in the future. So I like to take down this idea that we're going to do it perfect and we're going to protect our kids from all the things that we are as adults, because I don't think that's realistic either.
Yeah. Maybe I'll pull one that just came in on the Q&A. It's a wonderful question. What do you do if your child sees you crying from pain? So I'm going to answer this kind of by way of analogy. What do you do if your child sees you crying from grief or some other kind of a loss? And in general, a response that is explaining to your child what the experiences you're having inside in a really factual way. For most kids is incredibly helpful. So, with grief, it's helpful to say, I'm crying because I miss so-and-so and, blah, 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 blah. And so I think same with pain, to be able to say, I'm crying because right now this is very uncomfortable. But then the more that you are able to fill that in with great pain education, and this is something your Lin coaches can help with, is really accurate information about what pain is and how our brains are involved in pain and how our bodies respond and what mom or dad is doing and learning to try and move this experience to a different place can be incredibly, incredibly helpful towards kids making sense of why their parent is crying. And also for giving that factual information about my experience now and about what pain is, or current neuroscience around pain, will really help prevent what I think is the potentially problematic route that can happen when a child sees a parent crying, which is the child thinking that this is because I did something wrong. And so by being really upfront about the factual information and having that conversation, it can be incredibly, incredibly reassuring and empowering for a child to know this is not because you forgot to put the butter back into the fridge. that mom is or dad is crying right now.
I think it's a really nice connection back to that first part about vulnerability, where you're unable to sit with your kid in church, and remembering that kids have a view of the world that we don't always understand. And the only way we get to understand that is by taking the time to connect with them, maybe later, and sharing our experience, but also learning to understand their experience a little better. The thing I thought of is, the reason 1 in 4 people worldwide are in chronic pain is exactly because a lot of us learned growing up that emotions were not okay. And so when you understand that physical symptoms are interchangeable with emotions and emotional sensations, and that the physical symptoms are our way of expressing big emotions like anger or sadness, then is it possible that's an opportunity to normalize for your kids that emotions are okay, emotions are safe, they're normal, everyone has them, and they're not permanent, that they will pass. So to me, it feels like a great opportunity to teach kids exactly what they need to learn, which is that emotions are safe. And I think all of us probably need to hear that more.
Agreed. Jordan, you want to top up one more question and then we'll wrap it up?
Sure, yeah. So this relates to a couple of the topics we talked about today. I have a 10-year-old son, and I have suffered from chronic back pain for around 20 years now, and 5 back surgeries later. I feel horrible because I can't do things with my son that we enjoy together.
Great. Well, I love that you've lined us up for an ability to kind of go back through the themes and the tips. I really think the answer here is thinking back to all the things we've talked about how do we be honest and explain to our kids that we're different. There's some things I can't do, but there's many I can do. Finding moments where you can really connect with your son in a way that works for you, incredibly important. Letting yourself be comfortable setting some boundaries, and especially if you can do it with a bit of humor to it. Having those friendships so that gosh, I can't kick a soccer ball with my son, but his uncle does that with him. And I can be in the background making sure that I'm setting that up because I have cultivated friendships and taken some help. Focusing on the positive and the things that are most important to you. And lastly, finding a perspective that helps. So when my perspective is, I can't be there for my son, it's going to feel like you're not there. And when your perspective is, gosh, I have a whole bunch of things I can find places to do with him in my own way, shape, and form, it's going to feel really different in terms of your parenting. Yeah, Charlie, anything else we want to add as kind of a wrap up there?
I just think it's a great opportunity to connect. I think as more kids start to understand how pain and other symptoms work, we're going to have a new generation of how kids navigate physical sensations in their body and emotions. I hope that's where we're headed with this. And so what a great opportunity as a parent to talk about that experience and to help a kid understand pain and how it works so that they have a different path going forward. You set them on a different path that allows them to maybe avoid having the same outcome.
Correct. So I think we're gonna wrap up today's webinar. I really appreciate everybody who is here, and hopefully you came out with some interesting, helpful new ways to think about parenting through a chronic pain experience, and maybe also some interesting thoughts on things that if you chose to become a LIN member, that our coaches are really versed in helping people to actually get going in their life. Because it's one thing to hear it on the webinar, and it's another thing to put it into practice day in and day out. And that's what our team is here to do, is to help change some aspirational ideas into realities in people's lives. So thank you so much for your time, and have a great day today. We'll keep the lines open if people have other questions they want to stick into the chat. Charlie and I'll be able to answer through chat for a couple minutes here too.
Thanks, Abigail. It was really, really well done. I appreciated the way you structured that, and very rich conversation.
It's always a treat, Charlie. Have a great day.